Hello there, my name is Amanda May and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be doing my December wrap-up. So the first book that I read in December was The Well of Ascension by Brandon Sanderson. This is book 2 in the Mistborn trilogy. I'm slowly making my way through this series. I read The Final Empire in November, I read the second one in December, and I'm planning on reading the third book, The Hero of Ages, in January. So I really enjoyed the first book. It was my favorite book of 2020. And so I was really expecting to love the second book, and I wasn't disappointed, to be honest. I loved the second book, but at first I was a little worried. When I started this book, I realized that there is a gap of a year, a full year in between the first book and the second book, and that really threw me for a loop. I did not like that. There were some things that had clearly taken place I wanted to experience and I didn't get to because he skipped a year. And so that wasn't my absolute favorite. But now that I know the story of the second book, I do understand why Sanderson did that, and I'm okay with it. I have come to terms with it. I've made my peace. But yeah, fair warning, if you haven't read the second book, there's a year-long gap in between the first and the second books. Still, overall, I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 5 stars, which, if you don't know, I don't really rate books unless they're 5 stars or unless I am just really confident on the rating that I'm giving the books. So you won't really hear me rate books very often unless I am giving it 5 stars. Just FYI. But I did give this book 5 stars. I really enjoyed being back with these characters and getting to see how certain characters interact with others. There are some character interactions that we did not get to see in the first book that we do get to see in the second book, and that was really interesting for me. There are also a few new characters in the second book that I thoroughly enjoyed, and it's really hard for me to talk about this because clearly it's not the first book in the series, and so almost anything I say is going to be spoilery, so I'm trying really hard to not spoil anything, but it makes it hard to talk about this. Just know that I really liked it, and that I'm really excited for the third book and the conclusion to this trilogy. Next up, I read the Mistborn prequel, The 11th Metal by Brandon Sanderson. This is a collection of short stories that take place in the Cosmere, the universe that Mistborn takes place in, that the Stormlight Archive takes place in, along with various other books that Sanderson has written. So this doesn't say The 11th Metal, but the only thing I read in this collection of short stories was The 11th Metal. You know what, I'll put a picture of The 11th Metal up here just so that you know what the cover looks like. If you want to pick up the ebook or something, this is what it looks like. So again, this is kind of hard to talk about because spoilers, but I feel like I can say that in this short story we follow one of the main characters of the first book, Kelsier, who has recently discovered that he is a Mistborn, which means that he can burn all of the different allomantic, I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, all of the different allomantic metals, which give him certain supernatural abilities. So he has recently discovered that he is a Mistborn, and this is like a little mini adventure where we follow him when he's a little less adept at controlling his powers, which is really interesting to see. But I did really enjoy it, and it's really short. I think it might be 20-something pages long, so for any of you who have read Mistborn, or even if you've just read the first book, I think that's all you would need to read in order to get everything that you need to out of this short story. I highly recommend it. The next book I read in December was D, A Tale of Two Worlds by Michelle Faber, and I was really intrigued by the premise of this story. This is a standalone, so it's easy to talk about. It takes place in our world, and one day our main character notices that the letter D is disappearing. Her parents, her friends, her school teachers are all talking like they normally would, using words that they normally would, except if there's a D in the word, they just kind of leave it out. So if they're saying very bad indeed, it would be very bad in me, which just to me sounds crazy and like it would be really hard to write about, honestly. Kind of surprisingly, I didn't find any typos in this book, which amazes me. But anyway, it gets worse. Not only are people not pronouncing the D in certain words, but things that start with a D are disappearing. So dogs are disappearing. The donkey derby is canceled and nobody knows even what it is. And our main character seems to be the only person who remembers that there's a letter D and who's bothered by this. And she kind of gets into some trouble because she is still using the letter D. And for instance, when she's writing papers in school and spelling things with a D, the teacher marks them all as spelled wrong. That's a small example of kind of what it's like to be living in this world where the letter D is disappearing. And that's the first small half of the book, is her living in this strange new world. The second half and the larger half of the book is her going on an adventure to find out what's happening to the letter D and to save it, essentially. And this is a portal fantasy, kind of like Narnia, where the second half takes place in a world that is not our own, which was honestly what I was expecting the entire book to be. I was thrown for a loop when I realized that at the beginning of the book we were on Earth, and I was not expecting that. So that honestly worried me a little bit because I was hoping that this would be a high fantasy. Turns out it's a portal fantasy, which I'm fine with. That was fine. But I was honestly glad that the first half was the shorter half, because once we get to this other world, things start to get really interesting. Another thing I wasn't really expecting for this book was for it to read like a middle grade. I'm not sure what this is marketed as, to be honest. I haven't heard really anyone else talk about this book, but I was expecting more of a YA type read. I don't know why, but for me it feels more like a middle grade, which ended up being fine. That's fine. The main character is a very young girl, so I guess that makes sense. Anyway, all in all, it was a really cute book. I'm not angry I read it or anything. It certainly wasn't my favorite book of the year or anything. But it was a fun time, and it didn't take me very long to read. It's only 300 pages long. Next up, for the month of December, I read 2 RWBY books. RWBY is a high fantasy TV show that my husband and I really enjoy watching. It's kind of an anime. I think of it as an anime, even though it's produced by Rooster Teeth, who is based in Austin, Texas. So I don't think it's technically an anime, but it's basically an anime. Anyway. The first one is RWBY After the Fall, and the second one is Before the Dawn. And these both follow a bunch of side characters from the TV show. And so it was really nice being back in this world and being able to follow these side characters. And I got a lot of extra information that you don't get in the TV shows. So that was really interesting. I feel like I'm more knowledgeable about the whole storyline. And my husband and I are actually currently rewatching all of the seasons that have come out so far, because they are in the process of releasing the most recent season, which I think is season 8. So we're rewatching 1 through 7, and I get to like fill them in on some background knowledge that's in these books but not in the show, and so that's fun. These stories take place in the world of Remnant, and in Remnant there are creatures of Grimm, which are monsters that are drawn to negative human emotions. And so when there's something really tragic happening, or when people are just getting really angry and fighting with each other, or really sad or scared, these Grimm are drawn to that. They show up and they start killing people. And so in this world, there are huntsmen and huntresses whose job it is to protect the people from the creatures of Grimm. And our main characters are all huntsmen and huntresses in training. And to be clear, this book, the first one, After the Fall, takes place after the season 3 of the show, and then this one takes place shortly after this one. It doesn't really matter. I guess after season 5 of the show. I think that's right. I think this is after season 5 of the show. Yeah, let's go with that. Now, when I was reading the first one, I was a little taken aback by just how many typos there were. It took me out of the story a little too much, just seeing that many typos on the page. But the writing was really good. The dialogue was really good. It felt like I was watching episodes from the TV show, so that was really fun. And I should say the second one didn't have hardly any typos. It was like reading a normal book. So I don't know what happened with the first one, but they should maybe try and reprint that without so many typos. I think that's warranted. So these were just really short, fun reads. They're each about 300 pages long. And I mean, obviously I don't recommend that you read these unless you go and watch RWBY, the TV show. But if you know what RWBY is, if you do watch it, I do actually highly recommend that you read these. The last book that I finished for December and for the year 2020 was To Sleep in a Sea of Stars by Christopher Paolini. This was my very first space opera and I loved it. I listened to the audiobook and read along in the book, which was really nice because I was able to speed the audiobook up way faster than I thought I would be able to. And I feel like that's gonna really come in handy in the future, being able to do that. I don't know why I hadn't thought of that until reading this book, but speeding up audiobooks is a thing and it's really helpful. So this takes place in the relatively far off future, I guess. It takes place in our universe and we follow our main character, Kira, and she finds an alien artifact, which is essentially like a suit that adheres to her body and becomes part of her. Like she can't take this suit off. And that creates a lot of complications for Kira. As you might be able to imagine, contact with an alien life form is a quarantinable event. I don't know how to say that. She has to be quarantined because we as humans don't know how this alien life form will affect us. It's kind of like when people were still exploring Earth. You have people from Europe going to the Americas and spreading a bunch of diseases that Native Americans didn't have any defense against. It's that kind of idea, right? Alien life forms could very easily cause a lot of problems and contaminate the human race. So yeah, it causes a lot of problems for her in that regard, but it also kind of takes place right at the same time where alien life forms, not the suit, but like other alien life forms actually show up and start attacking the human race, and it looks really bad. It is a worst case scenario type situation where the human race is in danger of annihilation. And so Kira has to find a way to coexist with this suit of hers. I'm calling it a suit because that seems to be the easiest thing to do. But since she can't take the suit off, she has to find a way to coexist with it and figure out how she can help in this fight to save humanity. And it's really interesting. I think Christopher Paolini did a really good job with the scientific aspect of this. In the back, there are some appendixes. I'm gonna look that up. Yeah, appendices. It's appendices, okay. In the back of the book, there are some appendices about the science, and I was just really impressed with how consistent he is and how realistic I feel like the science is. And he has diagrams throughout the book every so often. You didn't see any just then, but there are diagrams and visual representations of different solar systems where the story takes place. And I just think he did a really good job at making it seem pretty realistic. I highly recommend this to anybody who wants to pick up a space opera. You should pick up this one. This one's great. And that's it. Those are all of the books that I read in December and what I thought of them. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you would please subscribe, that would really help. You can also click the bell icon to be notified whenever I post new videos. In any case, please leave a comment down below telling me if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them, or telling me what books that you read in December. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video. Bye.